What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's video. Reacting to 10 Guitars Everyone Hated and Why by Philip McKnight. So what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be reacting to 10 Guitars Everyone Hated and Why by Philip McKnight. As per usual, if you have not already, please go and subscribe to Philip McKnight. Fantastic guitar YouTuber, a lot of actual tech tips, as well as, history of guitars and builds. And if you want to really get down to the nitty-gritty specs, oh yeah, you want to be subscribed to him. But then again, if you're subscribed to me, and if you're not subscribed to a lot of the individuals that I'm doing reaction videos to, that's kind of odd. So anyways, make sure you give Phil a sub. And as well, I've included the link of the original video in the description down below. Please go there and give that a like as well. And on this video, my video, leave a comment on what you'd like to see me react to next. And now let's get to it.
I wonder if in 30 to 50 years that position will change. So let's start with the first one, the Gibson Les Paul. This came out in 1952, and by 1961, Gibson stopped making it because no one wanted it. Of course, by the mid-60s, they took off in popularity, of course, because there's a common story in this video, which is some amazing artists use them. I always like this analogy. If artists were chefs, then their albums would be the meal, and when you love a meal, you want to know what the ingredients were in that meal. Like, what guitar did you use? What chords did you use? And all of a sudden, you're interested. So this is a guitar, like I said, started off bad, but now I'd say this is one of the most iconic instruments of all time, and
Between
definitely
that and the Strat,
one of the most coveted. People love this probably more than any other guitar in the world when it comes to just the aspiration of it. And yet it started out with no one wanted it. Which leads me to the second guitar, which actually is even funnier.
Hard to believe there was a time where nobody wanted a Les Paul. Then again, Les Paul was laughed at when he brought his first version, the Log, to jam sessions. He got laughed at by people because it was basically a 4x4 with a makeshift pickup on it. And yeah, it just, people weren't ready for certain things when they came out. Some things were vastly ahead of their time. And the good old Les Paul was one of them. But yeah, when you think electric guitars, iconic electric guitars, two in particular come to mind. The Les Paul and the Strat. Those are two of the most iconic guitars in the world. But yeah, hard to think about that, you know what I mean? Because again, I'm a bit of an old timer. I'm not that old that, I was around when that came in. But by the time I started playing, a Les Paul and a Strat were already standard issue. Complete and total standard issue. Yeah.
Because the Gibson Les Paul did so bad, they actually stopped making that one to make this. Now we know this is now the Gibson SG. The Gibson SG started basically as a Gibson Les Paul. It was a rebrand, double cut.
Yep. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. They just ended up doing that version and calling it a Les Paul. But then Les Paul was like, no, I don't like it. Take my name off of it. And then it became the SG, which just stands for solid guitar. That is true. I don't recall, I know that, but I don't recall people hating it when it first came out. I don't know. Again, I wasn't exactly around back then. There's not that much gray in this beard. Actually, there's pretty much nothing but gray in this beard. But I'm not that old, is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, I don't know that much about the history of how people reacted to them back then and all that sort of thing. But I know that Les Paul did not like his name being associated with that and said, no, me no likey.
It was hated even more. Guitar players didn't love it. And what's funny is it took guitar players a little while again to discover they loved the fact that it's thin, it's light, it sounds huge.
Great access to the high frets.
And now again, it's another iconic instrument, albeit not the Gibson Les Paul.
great access to the high frets. As you can see over there, the way that cutaway is, that's one of the first guitars that had a cutaway that you could really get up. You can't see it because I'm in the way now in the close-up. That you could really get up into the high frets. And they were actually playable to get up into those higher frets. Actually, later on, I know that Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath ended up getting his custom build that was 24 frets. I don't know how many of them after that or around that time had 24 frets too, but yeah, and really, really quite playable to get to the highest frets on those SGs. Really nice.
Iconic level, but very, very, very cool and very desirable. So again, it's interesting, 2 guitars in a row. No one liked. Let's jump ahead. Let's go a little bit sideways. Here's the one that really cracks me up. In the 80s, a person named Maestro and Steve Vai both came out with a 7-string guitar. This 7-string guitar, solid body, wasn't entirely new. They'd already been making 7-string hollow body guitars for jazz players, but as a rock genre guitar, a solid body, this was new and unique.
Yep.
It was a flop. The Maestro one, which was made by Fender, never even saw production. And the Steve Vai one, although doing limited production, and even...
Yep. Steve Vai was the first one to really do a well-known production and 7-string guitar that I can remember that was really well-known. And it was pretty much something just for Steve Vai. That was the 80s. But come the 90s... bands like Korn and all the other new metal bands, because, 5 and 6 string basses were already around for quite some time. The bass player having that low B string was nothing new. Now, a lot of bands that wanted to play really heavy down-tuned music, like, wait, our bass player's already got a low B string. Wait a minute, Ibanez and Steve Vai made these guitars that have a low B string. We can make it even heavier. So bands like Korn and other bands adopted the 7 strings, and that was responsible for nu metal. Again, now I remember because I was around for all this. And I remember, yeah, it was almost considered like a niche thing when they first came out, the 7-string Ibanez Universes. I think that's what it was called that Steve Vai played, like in this picture here. It was considered like, okay, niche only for Steve Vai type thing. So commercially, they weren't that big. They were also fairly expensive from what I remember. But then, not even a decade later, come the 90s, come bands like Korn and all the nu metal stuff. And now, 7 and 8 string guitars are enormous. They all started right here.
Even being on an iconic album cover. In fact, the album cover, Passion Warfare, was one of the highest selling instrumental albums of all time. The guitar was actually on the front of the cover. It still did not take off. The first time I saw one was Steve Vai, but then the second time was the guitar player from Morbid Angel. It wasn't until Korn and bands later adopted this and found it. Now, funny about this guitar, the 7-string, is that it actually was hated, loved, then hated, then loved. It's got a rebound effect. By the time the Korn, Limp Bizkit, and you name it bands started playing these, players got sick of them again. They rebounded and came back, and now 8-string guitars and 7-string guitars are very popular again.
Gent.
Probably not as popular as
Because
that
of
one
Gent.
time, but very popular again. So again, a guitar that's
all the really, really, really heavy gent, stuff, 7 and 8 string, and sometimes even 9 string guitars. So there still is a lot of music that does use 7 string and even 8 string guitars. They're just not the most commercial forms of music. But yeah, they're still in very, very, very heavy use today. Pun completely intended.
had its peaks and valleys, but is at least on its peak right now. And that brings us to number 4, the headless guitar. Now, the headless guitar is a funny guitar because Ned Steinberger invented the original headless guitars that came out in the late 70s. Even players like Eddie Van Halen played them and recorded songs with them. They were being used by so many players, but alas, it just died. The hatred for them was just too much. But Ola...
Yeah, I, myself, never have been a fan and never will be a fan. It's just something about it that just doesn't appeal to me. One of the main things is I like having all my guitars and basses be able to hang on the wall. I don't want to get a special kind of hook to have to do that. I don't like the idea of guitars shoved into a case, shoved into a corner. You're less likely to pick it up and play it. Plus, if I'm ever not playing an instrument, I look at guitars and basses like they're beautiful works of art in as of themselves, that you pick them up and play art, and you make art with them. I'd rather have a guitar or a bass hanging on the wall than a painting or a picture any day. I know you can get, but you have to get different hooks, and I live in a smaller house and all that, and I'm just going nuts with finding creative ways to stick all my instruments on my walls and not clutter the house too much with too many instruments. And yeah, there's just something about, a guitar or bass to me just has to have a headstock. That's just me. Don't give me any hate. Don't throw any shade. I don't give anybody a hard time that does like headless guitars or basses. I know a lot of people that are fantastic players, and I'm a fan of a lot of players that use headless guitars and basses. Just myself, no. I want a headstock. I want that, and I'm also not really a fan of odd-shaped guitars, or offset, as they call them most of the time, too. But that's just me. And again, I am a big fan of a lot of people that do use said instruments. This is not me saying do not get a headless guitar. No, I'm just saying that's just my opinion. I understand, it just seems odd to me. But your mileage may vary.
Strandberg brought them back for sure in popularity, and we started noticing more and more guitar players play them. Now we see tons of brands making them. It definitely has an extreme reaction. People still hate them or love them. I would say, based on their popularity growth, the fact that each year there's more of them and more companies doing them, I'd like to see where this guitar is in another 10 years. Personally, I'm a huge fan of headless guitars. So right now is a good time to talk about our sponsor. It's the CMA YouTube channel. One of the shows I really like is In Their Boots, and the reason I like it is because it shows you a behind the scenes of the day-to-day life of an artist. Not only do you get to see how hard they prepare to do their craft, but also you get to see they have a lot of fun. And that's why people choose to make music, because it is fun even when it's hard. And that's something I love to be reminded of. It's why we're all drawn to music. One of the things I think you'll like especially is the fact that you don't just get to see the end product. Just like this channel, it's about learning about what goes into doing something, and not just being presented the end result. Some other CMA content I think you guys will like is the High Notes, where CMA sits down with country music icons, up-and-coming artists, stagehands, tour managers, and all the people who make country music what it is, and see how they prepare for the day before their career milestones. So go to the link in the description down below to check out the In Their Boots playlist, and subscribe to the CMA YouTube channel for more behind-the-scenes action in country music. The next guitar isn't necessarily a guitar, it's a thing about a guitar. This particular guitar is 5 pounds.
There's people that had issues with light guitars. Obviously, they fall into one, if not yet both, of two groups. Very, very young people, or people without back problems. I don't fall into either of those groups anymore. So I love me some light guitars these days. My Gibson Melody Maker that came with a single P90 in the bridge that I now have modified, that's got a pickup in the neck as well too, and it's an 81-85 set. I've never actually weighed it, but it's got to be maybe even less than 5 pounds. And my recent custom build that will later be featured in other videos to come, I've never weighed that. That is barely weighing more than my Gibson Melody Maker. That's quite light. Yeah, as somebody who's getting a little up there in age and has back issues, I got no issues with light guitars at all. I welcome them.
Now, what's funny about that is when electric guitars became very popular, heavy guitars were actually popular. Light guitars were something that guitar players never looked for, asked for, or wanted. In fact, they could pick up a guitar, and if it was too light, they would put it down. They were seeking heavier guitars. That is so different today. Companies like Sweetwater even let you sort not only by price, but by weight. You can sort all their electric guitars by weight to see which are the lightest ones and the heaviest ones in the bunch.
And that's actually the headless guitars that I said I was not a fan of, backing up to the headless guitar, now that we're talking about weight. That is one of the many advantages of a headless guitar. Plus the way the body is on one of those old Steinbergers from back in the day, or even one of the newer ones that he had. You can get right up to that 24th fret flawlessly, and as well, since there's a lot less stuff on there, it's going to be a lot lighter. So I do see the advantages of all those headless guitars and all that, because they're lighter. And I absolutely see the advantage of a lighter guitar in general all day long.
See this drive to lighter guitars. Now, it could be because there's an aging market. You have a lot of guitar players that are a lot older than they were.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think a lot of guitar players have discovered that a lighter guitar doesn't necessarily sound a lot different than a heavier guitar. So why have an extra 3-4 pounds around your neck if you don't need it? The Fender Jazzmaster. This is another guitar that when it came out, they thought this was gonna be huge. And it was a flop. In fact, it was made to be an elite guitar in the Fender lineup. It wasn't until later when surf rock players started buying these and using them that they took off. So this is another guitar, interestingly enough, telling that same story. Nobody wanted it until they saw an artist using it. So this is another guitar, started out being hated, but now truly loved. This one isn't a...
Wow, I was not aware of that. You know, I have myself a Harley Benton Jazzmaster copy. I think it's a great guitar. It's as close as I go to any odd-shaped guitars. I don't know if a Jazzmaster can necessarily be considered like an offset. Again, I'm not throwing any shade on people that like those type of guitars. I'm talking about my own personal preference. And as always, you know, regardless if there's guitars or tones that I don't particularly like for myself and my playing, I can guarantee you of every one of those, there are musicians that I'm a fan of that have those guitars and those type of tones. It's just not a thing that I do. It's not for me. Oh my God, cheap or low price guitars. Wow. No, loving those right now. Loving those, loving those, loving those, loving those.
Again, it's not a guitar, it's a type of guitar. Cheap guitars. This is another thing that players used to hate, cheap guitars. Owning a cheap guitar was a badge of shame. Your mother or father taking you to Sears to buy a cheap guitar.
Looks like he's got a Squier Strat right there. A Sunburst Squier Strat. There is nothing wrong with a Squier Strat. Not a thing at all. I saw a video of a session musician that had a home studio. When I say a home studio, a real home studio. Not like you see on some forums out there and people are like, here, check out my home studio. And it's like, wait a minute, dude. That's not a home studio. That's a full functioning studio that just happens to be in your house. Where these people have like, you know, $250,000 to $500,000 worth of outboard gear and they call it their home studio. No, that's a studio in your house. No, like a studio kind of like what I have, a computer, an interface, studio monitor speakers, some headphones, everything done within the box. He recorded a track for Justin Bieber that ended up being a hit with a $99 Squier Strat that he got at Guitar Center used. There was 5 $99 Squier Strats. He said he picked them up and he just did the James Brown chord. Nope, until he got the one that just felt right for him. He thought that maybe they were going to use just a section of the part that he did on said inexpensive Squier Strat. No, they kept the whole track in its entirety. All done in like, I forgot what DAW he was doing. It was just DI tracks too. They were just DI tracks with just some plug-in in the back and a Squier Strat. If you take an inexpensive instrument, get it set up properly, depending on how inexpensive, you might have to change some things like the tuners or the nuts sometimes, depending. You can take inexpensive, I've been doing this for a long time. Again, I'm a former full-time musician that made my living playing music. I still gig quite often via way of doing live streams and all that sort of stuff, but I have taken quite a few inexpensive instruments and had them slightly modified, and you can get some great sounds and some great playability for not a lot of money. Just make sure it's a decent instrument that needs just a little bit of tweaking. Most of the time, like, I've been addicted to Harley Benton stuff lately, man. Wow, I've got 8 Harley Bentons. They're absolutely fantastic, and I'm not endorsed by them at all. Quite a few of them need no mods at all. Quite a few of them, for my preference, I just throw in locking tuners because it's just easy, and that's all you need. But no, do not ever throw any shade on inexpensive instruments. Do they play good? Yes. Do they stay in tune? Yes. Do they sound good? Yes. Because at the end of the day, it's really going to be about the signal chain when it comes out for the tone. All of the tone, most of it, not counting in your hands, is going to be on the signal chain. What kind of amp and speaker or IR you have at the end. That's going to make the biggest determining factor on the tone. As long as said cheap Squier Strat or whatever inexpensive instrument that you have doesn't have any huge grounding issues, it's not shorting out, it's not noisy, it gives a clean signal. Those are single coil pickups. They're going to sound like single coil pickups. You know, as long as all that's together and it's able to stay in tune and it's comfortable enough that you can play, that's all you need. Of course, having higher quality instruments is always better, but you don't always need it. Make music with anything you can. Don't let anybody shame you. Oh, you got a Squier, you couldn't get a Fender Strat. Don't worry about them. Play the instrument that you have. Make music with what you have. Okay, got off into a little bit of a rant there. Sorry about that.
Brand guitars, cheap, inexpensive guitars like Squiers. Owning a Squier was, again, a badge of shame forever. Now cheap guitars are some of the most watched on YouTube, and the most modified instruments. Inexpensive guitars, players are okay with them. In fact, even people like Eric Johnson have touted that one of his favorite guitars is this inexpensive cheap guitar that he has. So it's great to see that we've embraced the fact that a price tag doesn't dictate what we do with an instrument or what the quality is.
For some,
this
not
next
all.
one is a travel guitar. What's funny about travel guitars is for a long time, they had a horrible stigma. Sure, you would buy one, take it to the hotel room and play it, but now you see real musicians playing travel guitars on stage. I see it all the time. I think the necessity
I have not seen that yet
forced itself into the opinion. In other words, what I mean by that is the reality now is with the expenses of travel and the expenses of taking equipment, you're seeing more and more travel guitars become popular. I've actually seen artists on large stages playing with a travel guitar in the last year or so. So we're seeing travel guitars literally become a much bigger thing, especially since baggage is becoming such a problematic thing with airlines. I know what you're thinking. The Strat was not popular? No, Strat was very popular. Relic guitars, beat up guitars. Guitars that look like they're not new when they're new.
Okay, again, just my opinion. I am not down with relic guitars. Trying to make it look like it's road worn and you've really worked it in and all that. Again, not throwing any shade against anybody who likes them. But for myself, it's still a no. I'm not down with relic guitars. If you do that yourself, that's one thing, because it's got the personality of the wear that you've given it from using it and playing it hard throughout years. Like my red G&L 4-string bass, it's modified all to hell with 2 jazz bass pickups and a P bass pickup, all EMGs, which was the prototype for Black Beauty, the 6-string sound gear that I had modified the exact same way because I wanted a 6-string bass version of it. I've had it since I was 15, and I haven't been 15 for a little while. So needless to say, it's got some wear in it and all that sort of stuff. It happened just by way of it happening. But again, not throwing any shade at anybody else, but relic guitars, for me, it's still no. The only way I could see buying one is if somehow I picked one up, I started playing one, and all of us guitar players and bass players know this. There's every now and again, you just pick up an unlikely instrument, whether it be used, secondhand, whatever, and you just start playing it and you go, wow, I have to have this instrument. If it just played that great, felt that great, sounded that great, had the features I wanted to, but it was relicked, I might have to make an exception, but I would never personally seek out a relic guitar. That's just me. Again, not throwing no shade. Don't throw no my way.
This did not do well at first, so you know. It was somewhat popular only in certain circles and only in small amounts. Now you see it even in guitars that don't even make sense that they're relic. What I mean by that is, sure, a vintage styled instrument's relic to look like they've been played for 40, 50 years. It makes sense. But now you have modern companies making relics of their modern guitars.
Yep.
Let's just rust out the equipment and beat them up with keychains. Whether you like it or not, it's popular now. In fact, the most expensive guitar offerings from Gibson, from Fender, from Novo are relic instruments. So it's, again, didn't do well at the beginning, but then it definitely took off. So apparently, even though we didn't like it at first, we like it now. And that leads us to our last guitar, the 80 shred guitar. Now I know this one is going to be controversial because of...
Oh man, I love me some 80 shred guitar, obviously. So that was hated out of the gate. Odd. Very odd. I don't remember actually, when it first came out. I was around when it first came out, but I hadn't started playing guitar. I didn't start playing until 1990. I started playing in 1990. By that time, these were already huge for 80 style players. Huge for 80 style players. Absolutely enormous. The RG, that looks like an RG style. Still huge. My latest guitar build is based off of a Gem/RG. My custom guitar build is based off of that. Although a little bit different pickup configuration, completely different. But yeah, hard to believe that people hated those at first. They just practically play themselves.
The first thing a lot of you are thinking right now is 80 shred guitars were loved when they came out. Yes, they became huge very quickly, and then they dominated the market. And then, like a moment in time, they were just gone. By the 90s, they were sitting in pawn shops and music stores, rotting. Nobody wanted them. 80s guitars were just killed by the grunge movement. Now, why that's interesting is there is a resurgence now, but mostly for a nostalgic purpose. In other words, this is the guitar they had when they were younger, or they never had that guitar when they were younger, and they want to go back and kind of relive that moment. But you are seeing the looks and aesthetics of these 80s classic guitars popping up more and more on the newer build guitars. What's interesting, though, about the 80s guitar, they are absolutely attached to one moment in time, one genre. And the reason I say that is that when you think of Fenders and Gibsons and Gretsches, I mean, you can think 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Every decade, one of those were relevant somewhere. Where the 80s era guitars, the flashy, fast-playing guitars, were definitely honed in to a period of time and then gone. I'm glad to see they're back, and I think it's exciting.
I never really thought of it that way. Because like we were saying earlier with the 7-string guitars, the first version of the 7-string guitars that were really big, the Steve Vai version, were basically a 7-string version of this, RG/Gem. So still kind of shreddery style. Shreddery? Oh, am I trying to make up words there? Yeah, it's kind of like a shredder-ish style guitar, although it had that 7th string, that low B string. So it kind of stuck around in that sense, but yeah, I guess I see what he's saying. It wasn't the all-around shredder, speed demon 6-string guitar, and he's kind of right. But it's kind of such a shame because they are just fantastic guitars. You can play any type of rock on them or even bluesy type stuff. A lot of them have single coils too, or coil splitting options, so they're not all dual humbucker like this. Every one of them, there was a lot of super strat style, single humbucker style. That pickup configuration alone gives you lots of versatility as far as tone goes. But yeah, interesting. Never thought of it that way.
Doing so many reviews on the channel, what I notice is that so many times I do something new. Every time I grab something new or different and show it, the reaction is always, I hate that. In fact, I see the word hate. I hate that guitar. That guitar is horrible. Where you don't see that about a lot of the other traditional guitars that you see over and over again. And I always wonder, in 10, 15 years, will people look back at those comment sections and go, what? These guitars are the best guitars. This is what people are buying now. Wow. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and maybe subscribe. Definitely enter to win that guitar, like I said, and check out that video of that Hills guitar. And I want to thank again the CMA guys for making this video possible. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this list and what I said about the guitars, whether you agree or disagree. I'm interested in your thoughts. All right, guys, as always, I want to thank you so much for your time. To the next time, know your gear.
All right, that was reacting to 10 Guitars Everyone Hated and Why by Philip McKnight. As per usual, if you've not already subscribed to Philip McKnight, please go and do that now. I've also included the link to the original video in the description below. Go and click on that and give the original video a like. And on this video, my video, leave a comment on what you'd like to see me reacting to next. Thanks for checking out this video. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, click the notification bell, like, comment, and share. It doesn't cost a thing and would really help out the channel. Also, please subscribe to my other channel, GK Mac Music, for some live looping live streams with a side of jackassery, some original music, and some short content, also with a side of jackassery. If you'd like to help out the channel financially, you can buy some merch at the merch store, or you can become a channel member. As always, everyone, thanks so much for your continued support. Do what makes you happy.